alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Hello and welcome to Alive After Reading. I'm Tim Niederreiter, and with me today is a new guest, Rachael Tamayo. Welcome to the show, Rachel.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Well, it's always good to have new folks and former guests as well back on the show. But but you're new to us and the podcast, and you've also got a new book coming out or out already. Actually, I should be reviewing that. I said I wasn't going to eat crap this time, but I did. Anyway. What do you write about?
The best of us.
Yeah.
I am a thriller writer. I write psychological thrillers. I'm a former romance author. Believe it or not, it's quite a jump, I know. But yes, I'm a psychological thriller author. I've written 8 books.
Nice. That's a good number.
I've written so many, I'm not even sure.
8
books. The last 2, yes. Well, not 8 thrillers.
Oh, okay.
I've written 4 thrillers, and the rest are romance.
Okay.
Yes, but now I exclusively write thrillers. I don't write romance anymore.
Okay. So you switched gears there at some point.
I did.
What? Do you mind if I ask
It's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah. Do you mind if I ask you what the reasoning was? I mean, obviously you wanted to write thrillers, but was there anything more specific than that?
No, a part of it was, I mean, as much as entertaining as romance is to write and to read, I knew it just wasn't gonna satisfy my writing muscles, so to speak. Writing thrillers is so much more difficult than writing romance.
So you needed to lift more.
Yeah, the challenge. I really do I enjoy the challenge of writing a thriller. Because there's no real rhyme or reason. You can pretty much do whatever you want with them, with romance, it's got, A, B, C, and D. You pretty much they all have to have, and then they they have to have the happy ending and this and that. Thrillers don't have to have a happy ending,
Yeah.
They're just, action packed, suspenseful, and make you a little anxious, They're more difficult, and I love reading thrillers. And I felt like I started with romance because I wanted to hone my craft, make sure I was good enough to write a thriller. I didn't have the confidence. So I waited until I felt like I could try it, and then I never really went back. I started transitioning, and then I never went back to romance.
So how long did you write romance before you were writing thrillers? Just a few years? How long? When did you start writing, I guess?
Well, the books that are actually out, I picked writing up again when I was like, 37, 38, something like that. I've been writing my whole life.
Okay.
As a child, I wrote since I can remember. As a teenager, I started writing books, but I would just write them and put them in a closet,
Mm-hmm.
But I stopped, and I decided to start writing again and take it seriously. And when I was in my late 30s.
Cool. And then you wrote some romances, and ever since then you've been writing thrillers. Excellent.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it sounds like you finally got the books you really like to read. You got into those. I mean, you got to do the things that you've been reading anyway. Yeah, it's interesting.
Right. They do say that writers should always at least try to read books in the genre they prefer to write in. And it is true for any writers that are listening, because if you like to write a certain genre, you really do need to pick up books in that genre and read them, because it will only help you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really
I'm not one of those guys. Mm-hmm. I'm not one of the guys who says,
Mm-hmm.
you shouldn't write, because there's actually a school of thought that goes the opposite way and says you shouldn't write in the genre. Mm-hmm. You shouldn't write in the genre that you read a lot in, because you don't want to be influenced by the other books. But I don't agree with that at all. I think you're correct. Mm-hmm. You're right here.
I don't either.
Yeah, because if you don't know what the other books in your genre are doing, mm-hmm. how are you going to know what to avoid and what to do? And also how to change things to make it yours and just not bowl one straight down the alley by accident, because sometimes that happens. As someone who is bold as strike, and is not good at bowling and never bowls, sometimes it happens.
Right. and it does, and you're right. It's like myself, for example. You know, you can have an idea that you think is original that might not be quite as original as you think it is. You know, just because that's just the way it is. You know, and my personally, I mean, I'm trying to write a book, and I was struggling with it, the idea, and I'm like, man, this really does sound like Gone Girl. I don't want it to sound like Gone Girl, you know. And I've read it, the book, love the book, you know. And I don't have no intention of copying anything, so it's kind of good that I did read it, because I'm like, it kind of has that vibe to it. So I'm like, I gotta change this so it doesn't sound like I'm copying it, you know.
Right.
It's just because there's, you know, it's best to know. And when you're stuck, and for me, if I'm stuck, picking up a good thriller and reading it will really help me with that.
Yeah. When do you feel like you get, when you pick up a thriller when you're stuck, or, you know, pick up a book to read when you're stuck, when do you feel like you get the real advantage of it? How far into the book do you have to go to really pick up your own writing?
It just depends on the book. It's like, you know, you just pick up a good book and it's just so awesome, you know, or, you know, maybe it sucks, you know, it's always a gamble, you know, but just somewhere in there, you know, it's like you get lightning strikes your brain, you know.
Yeah, I know
like,
the feeling.
You start thinking and your mind starts to wander, and then all of a sudden you're unstuck, you know. It just kind of greases the wheels, I guess, so to speak.
Absolutely.
It gets things moving.
Yeah, I the lightning struck, that's exact. Oh, dogs. Interesting. But anyway, the lightning strike is really a good analogy here for how I feel when I read a book. When I'm trying to write something, and then I'm like, okay, I'm going to take a break, and you know, I'll read a fantasy book or a sci-fi book, because that's what I'm writing at the time. And then I'm like, now I gotta go back and write. Gotta go back, get back to that page, add more words or whatever.
Yeah. And there is also that school of thought that you have to be writing all the time, write every day. I do not subscribe to that theory.
Okay.
I don't. I can't. I'm one that I can only write if the mood is right, gut feels right in my gut. It's just I do much better to wait a month before I write anything again than if I write every day and just put out something I'm just going to put in the trash. It's so there's no wrong way to do it. Whatever works best for you, however you have to do it to put out your best work. You know, for myself, I can't force myself to write.
Oh,
I have to wait till it's
absolutely. Right. And it sounds like it works for you, obviously, because you get books done. You know, you got 8 books written at least that you were publishing, right? You got published. So what's the latest book you have published?
The latest book that came out on July 11th is called Carnal Knowledge. It is the second book in this Deadly Sins series. Now, the Deadly Sins series is a little bit different than most series because each book is a standalone story. Begins and ends. Characters do not recur. What is common, what makes it a series, is the Deadly Sins.
Yeah.
Each one of the books is a story about one of the 7 deadly sins. Carnal Knowledge is about lust, but not like the lust you would think.
Okay.
That it's about.
Surprise.
It's a serial killer story. Yeah, it's a serial killer story, sort of. But it's lust in the sense that lust is defined as like an insatiable hunger for something.
Yes.
You know.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah. And the first one before that was Break My Bones, which is Wrath. It's a domestic violence story. But yeah, those are the first 2.
Cool. And I assume that you're planning to do 7 of them, right?
Yes, one
awesome.
for each sin. And I honestly there's a couple of the sins, and I'm like, I have no idea what I'm going to do with it when it comes to it. But by the time I get there, it'll come to me. So.
Yeah, sloth might be a difficult one to make a thriller out of. I don't know.
Right.
That's more literary
I don't know what I'm going to do with that one, but I'll come up with something. Yeah.
It's like, yeah, the really lazy guy is the serial killer. Like, what, how is that a
Mhm.
thing? This isn't gonna work. He's not gonna kill anybody. He's too lazy.
Right. Right.
Anyway,
Yeah.
or
The body
whatever.
guy sits and plays video games all day. You know.
Yeah, just to throw out bad ideas. Oh, actually, no, I can see how that might
Yeah.
work. Honestly, I mean, I'm just impromptu brainstorm here, but like, I could see how you could
Yeah.
have like one, because especially in this day and age, the slacker kid who turns into a a shooter or something. I don't know.
Oh yeah, exactly. It can turn into you. Got to twist it and kind of make it.
I mean, it could be as long as you put it there, as long as you twist it right. You could have that, like because there's so many people. There's also or just somebody who's chronically unemployed. Could be the subject. Anyway, just thinking out loud there, I could see how that would work. I mean, I just but that just doesn't. It doesn't present like an immediate. It doesn't present like an immediate thing.
No.
I think that's really neat, actually. I love that kind of structure. Using a larger structure like the Seven Deadly Sins, stuff like that, and then it's like, well, how is this going to work? How am I going to make this fit with what I'm doing?
Right. Exactly.
Offers real creative opportunities.
Right, and it's just got to be the right thing. I've come up with several, and I've finished book 3, sent it to my publisher probably a couple of months back.
Okay.
And I hadn't written anything because I started one story and it wasn't right. And I started another story and it wasn't right. And my friend, who's also a writer, she's like, look, I've got an idea for you. You can have it. Basically about a Munchausen story.
Oh, okay.
I'm like, oh, that's a great idea, but I couldn't quite make it fit. I'm like, man, that's such a good idea.
Could you explain for the listeners what the Munchausen reference is?
Yes, Munchausen. There's 2 actual kinds of Munchausen, which I learned when I was doing research when I was trying to figure out if I was going to write it or what I was going to do with it. Munchausen by proxy is the one that you hear about where a parent is intentionally making their child sick or injured or unnecessary medical procedures so they themselves can get the attention from the sick child. Now, there's also Munchausen syndrome, which can be anybody in a position of care for anyone, a doctor, a caregiver for whoever, that makes that person intentionally sick basically for the same reason. There's different forms of it when you do research. It's not just, mother and child. There's several different aspects to it, which was where I find when I'm doing research to write whatever, I'll research something like that and I'll find that little hole that nobody quite noticed and it'll blow up into a book.
Oh, that sounds like I've never had Munchausen syndrome explained, and that is just sinister. It just sounds really, really scary.
And I'm like, that would make the best book, but it's like, it's not quite right. I can't make it work right now. I'm going to put it on the back burner, and come back to it. I will come back to it, but just not right now.
That's funny. It's funny because, I don't know, what were you going to say?
Oh, I don't know.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, you were talking about throwing out early part, you start one, throw it away, start another one. That I wish I'd just done that with this book, this last book. The book I've been working on for this year, and sadly it has been basically the whole year, is my second epic fantasy novel in this series. And I threw out the first whole novel that I wrote for this. I wrote 85,000 words. I threw it all away. And I'm like, well, I mean, not all of it, but most of it. It's like, this doesn't work.
Right.
And that was, and then it's like, okay, I guess I'm starting over.
I've done
scratch.
that.
It's so
I've done that. And I think that's actually great that you're willing to do that, because I've also edited here and there, and I've come across authors that get so physically and mentally and emotionally attached to their work, that there's no way it could be complete and total crap, which we all put out, even after Stephen King has probably put out stuff that we didn't know about that he threw in the trash, He
almost threw Carrie in the trash, too, so sometimes it goes the other way, but
exactly.
You don't necessarily know what's good, but on the other hand, I knew this one was bad. I was pretty sure about it.
Right. Yeah, and I've done the same thing. I've written entire books and I'm like, nah, this is just nah, and I threw it away.
Yeah. I mean, I don't actually delete the files, but I just like, no, this is going
right
in the
it'll
the
sit
storage
in my
file.
storage for 5 years before I find I'm not doing anything with this, and I'll probably just delete it or use a scene out of it here and there and then cut it.
Right. I mean,
go
on.
I do that with openings. Like when I wrote Lucifer's Game, because I'm not a writer that plans what I'm going to write. I don't outline my books. I just start writing, and they just kind of create their own tales. But Lucifer's Game is a supernatural thriller that I wrote when I was transitioning from romance into straight up psychological thrillers. It's the only supernatural book I've ever done. But I started that book over 6 times.
Wow.
I just scrapped it. I would get to a certain point, and I'm like, the beginning is wrong. So I would go back and start over and go back and start over. I do that every time. Every book has got like 2 or 3 beginnings that I've started at least.
Yeah, it's. I have a friend, a writer who I know from conventions and stuff, and he is kind of similar. He'll write, but he just does his first chapter. He writes the first chapter like 10 times, like 20 times.
Yeah.
Sounds very similar. Yeah.
Right, and I know other authors that they're so they won't move into the next chapter until the first chapter before it is absolutely perfect.
Right.
I can't do that.
No,
I'm like, no, I have a scene in my head and I have to get it on paper so I can continue. My in my brain, it'll just stay stuck in there and I can't get past it into the next part of the story until I get it down. So that's not a way I can write.
Yeah, I don't like going back through the story until I'm actually done writing it for the most part.
Yeah.
And I mean, I try to knock out that rough draft as fast as I can, which is why I end up sometimes with the book that just is the wrong book. Like an 85,000 word novel that doesn't do what I wanted it to do.
Right, yeah.
That I lost track of where I was going.
Right, yeah, and the story kind of takes its own momentum, and people that don't write don't like, what do you mean your character, comes alive or whatever? And I'm like, well, not like actually, but it's like they write their own story because it just kind of all snowballs and it just goes the way it goes,
Absolutely. I mean, this last there were different points of view in the previous book that I wrote for this series. Like, it's got 4 points of view, but it had 2 different ones additional to that in the original version. Some characters didn't exist in the previous version. It's like it just does this endless amount of weird things that, like, okay, this book just isn't doing it. It just can't work. It needs to be this instead of that.
Crazy Love has 3 points of view in it, and that one's got 3. I typically do write in multiple points of view throughout the book.
Do you ever find that difficult? Switching points of view while you're actually writing, or do you?
I've never had difficulty with it. Actually, Carnal Knowledge is the first book that I've ever done that doesn't do that.
It's just got one point of view.
It's just got one point of view. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it can be really sweet to just have one point of view, but I acknowledge that sometimes you need more than one. My favorite books some of my favorite books I've written have basically one point of view or one and then a few chapters from other points of view.
Right.
But like with the epic fantasy, with the giant fantasy books, like these have to have multiple points of view. That's what people expect.
Right. Yeah.
And it's tough. It was tough on me anyway.
It is, and because you have to get so deep into these characters' heads and into their world and feel what they're feeling in order to put it in there to where it's so realistic that the reader can just really get into it. So you have to really get into it because that's how it happens. With Carnal Knowledge, it's the first book. And I was kind of challenged, too, by some people. They read my books, and they're like, you really should try writing one from just one point of view. See how you do with it, So I was like, I'm going to take it as a challenge, and I'm going to try it. Because especially when I was trying to map it out, considering that Carnal Knowledge is a book about a serial killer, which I've never done before. And I was like, I had no clue. I could not put a way together to write from the killer's point of view without giving away who it was. Because I knew how I wanted this book to end. And this book has an epic twist at the end. and you can read the reviews on it. You can see them on Google. I mean, on Goodreads and on Amazon and everywhere. They're like, oh my God, the ending to this book. I was just completely blown away. And I'm like, that is completely what I was going for. I'm so excited about that.
Oh,
but there was no way I could have pulled off that epic surprise twist ending without that one point of view.
Yeah, that's so cool. I love that. That's a great. That's a great thing. I just gotta say, my longest book that I've ever written also was only one point of view. It was 170,000 words long or something, some huge number.
Man.
And I love that book, but it's so weird that like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna write this huge book, and like a lot of my shorter books have more than one point of view, but that's that huge one, just the one. And it really worked. Like I was so into that character's head. Like whenever I'd go, well, and I was so into writing that character. Like whenever for a while there, whenever I'd start typing, I would just start typing that character's name every time I started a new sentence.
Yeah,
it was really funny.
And I get too. I do also have to take those short breaks between books. Like I said, it's been a couple of months since I finished the third book. Since I started writing the new one, because I get so deep into those characters that I have to I can't jump from one book into the other that fast. You know, I have to like rest my brain because I'm like, I've created these people with all these feelings and all this stuff and all this crazy, these crazy things are going on. You know. And to jump into a completely different book with completely different characters and new problems and a new world and everything, and because I have to get so deep into it, I can't. And I struggle to start books sometimes because of it, because I have to cleanse my palate, I guess, so to speak.
Yeah, starting can be the toughest part sometimes. You know, just I mean, starting a session for me is actually the hardest part. Like starting a book, I can do that pretty reliably. That's just the way I work. But I sometimes just sitting down and writing the next scene can be a real pain in the butt. Yeah.
Sometimes you gotta take a break and just think it out. And I'm a firm believer in that opening with a bang. Yeah. You know, that first chapter, even if it's just one page, that's just so, oh my God, you know, that you cannot not continue, you know. And coming up with that beginning is not easy.
No.
And sometimes it doesn't come into you till you've already started the book, which I started the fourth book like 3 weeks ago, maybe. Okay. And I started it without that beginning. And then I'm writing and I'm like, and then it came to me and I went back and added in that crazy beginning, you know. Like, oh, I got it, you know. But yeah, I'm really a firm believer in that, and Break My Bones and then Carnal Knowledge, they both open, especially Carnal Knowledge. Carnal Knowledge opens with a big, like, oh wow, you know. And it does have a crazy twist at the end.
Cool. But, it's funny, the book I threw out the whole original version of, that it should be getting published soon. It's called Shadow Prince. It should be published in August. But it starts off with the first chapter is like there's a double murder at a party. Yeah. And that was a pretty big boom for this book. Like, it's like a big noble party, and it's like, boom. Suddenly, two of the highest, the two highest people there, dead. Right. And I thought that was to me, and it's just there was a lot of other stuff that makes that scene really good, but it's a big bang, relatively speaking. Yeah. So I know what you're talking about, is what I'm saying.
Right. And Carnal Knowledge begins with, she's in her mid-20s, she's going through some things in her life, she's working as like a legal assistant, and her husband cheated on her and they're separated. And so she's kind of trying to find her way, and she's just going through some stuff. And she's got a DWI. When her husband and her split up, she went and got drunk and got busted for drunk driving. First time ever she's been arrested. Only time she's ever done it. So she's on probation and she's not supposed to be out drinking and this and that. And she's just got some stuff going on. And in the beginning scene, she's in a club and she's drugged. She's been like roofied, and that's like a first paragraph, you know, of it. She's in a club. She knows something's going on. She's like, my friend, where did she go? She was supposed to be watching my drink, you know. Yeah. And I'm not drunk. I've only had this much. And then some guy catches her, you know, and that's where it opens, you know, and it's a crazy beginning. And yeah, there's mention of, you know, I've read through the reviews of the book, everybody likes it, but you know, there's a few like, I had a hard time connecting with her. She's not a real bubbly character, you know. She's going through a lot of stuff, and I think that comes off, and the readers understand that is they were able to finish it because you just can't put it down, because you just got to know what happens. But she's not a real bubbly like person, and
no, I like the way you're putting that. Yeah, but like those people, it's not like sympathy, but it's like you really don't want to be friends with this person right now, or be difficult to be friends with them.
Yeah, she's kind of introverted, and then I remember there was the one particular, like they didn't like the way she reacted. Well, I was a police dispatcher for 12 years, okay? And I answered 911, I dispatched police, I did all this stuff. So I have this sense of there are so many ways people react to chaos. Like some people, the ones that, like the whoever that was that commented, her reactions are kind of just muted, and I would think she'd be, more knowing that somebody's chasing her and that she's probably going to die, and she's just not reacting enough. But that's the thing. And that's what I try to portray is there is no one type of reaction. There's people that will freak out and they just can't function and they can't think. And then there's the other people that just completely shut down, and pull into themselves. And, so she's kind of somewhere in the middle, she has she has a reaction. Don't get me wrong, but she's not like completely, she doesn't lose it.
Doesn't get hysterical or
no, she never
like
does.
Yell at people and say what the hell is going on, that kind of thing necessarily.
Yeah, and that's the thing. There's so many ways. There's no one way people react. There's no right or wrong way to react to things like that. You just don't know. You don't know until you're in it.
Yeah.
But I've working for law enforcement. I've seen all kinds of things. I would answer 911 calls and things that had nothing to do with me. People would call me all kinds of names just because I was the one on the phone. You know.
Yeah.
And I never got upset about it because I understood. They're going through something that they've never been through, and you're here, and that's all there is to it.
Yeah, no, that makes so much sense, and it's an interesting insight too, because there's also just how people act when they think there's an audience, like when they know they're talking to somebody,
right?
It's like if you're talking to or like when I talk to my brother while he's driving him back from work because he lives in a different time zone, so he's driving home from work, and he'll call me. But he's always angry, basically. He's like the Incredible Hulk or something. But he's always angry, and just after work, he's always pissed off.
Yeah.
But anyway, he'll call me and he'll say something like, but because he's driving, he'll complain about the other drivers like he wouldn't if he wasn't talking to somebody. It's that kind of thing.
Right.
He's not really that
exactly venting. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, so thanks for being on the show. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm really glad to have been here. It was fun.
So, Rachel, tell people where they can find your work and where they should look for your website and stuff.
My website is rachaeltamayowrites.com. You can find, all my books. You can sign up for my newsletter. You can contact me, send me an email. I also have a blog. I have a book review blog. I'm terrible at blogging. I'm awful at it. So I do book reviews. I do book reviews. I read books and I write book reviews. That's what I do. So if you want to see what I'm reading, what my book tastes are, you can go there to find that out. And my books are available pretty much everywhere. Anywhere that you would want to look, Amazon, wherever you like to buy books, you can find them.
All right, great. Thanks for being on the show. It's been a good bit of fun. Yes.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. So, as for this podcast, you can find more of us at mentalcellularpublications.com. You can also find my new website, timneedawriter.com, which is spelled as it sounds. Not like my name, but they're said the same way. Anyway, so timneedawriter.com, and you can click the link there and join up with the writer community. If you're a writer and you're interested in learning more about writing, well, I have a lot to talk about, obviously, and my guests do too. So go check that out. And, of course, you'll be able to find Shadow Prince on Amazon later this month in August. So thanks for listening, everybody. Have a good week.
That tears it.